All right, welcome everyone. This is Bob Orr on behalf of WPVM 103.7 in the heart of downtown Asheville, continuing with our series of interviews of candidates for our appellate courts. And today we have Judge Carolyn Thompson, who is a candidate for the North Carolina Court of Appeals. Welcome, Judge Thompson. It's good to talk with you.
Good morning, and thank you so much. Good to talk with you as well.
Well, I like to start by asking a very general question to give you a chance to tell listeners about who you are, your background, and after that, we'll get into the judicial race and being a judge.
Thank you so much, Your Honor. My name is Carolyn Thompson. I'm a candidate for the North Carolina Court of Appeals, seat number 8. It's the open seat on your ballot. I am 26 years in as a trial attorney, district court judge, superior court judge. In fact, for seat number 8, I am the only candidate with prior judicial experience. I served on the district court bench for over 10 years in the 9th Judicial District, which consists of Vance, Granville, Franklin, Warren, and now Person counties. That court, as you know, has the kitchen sink approach: juvenile, criminal, domestic violence. We even had the responsibility of hearing mental health cases because we were next to the Butner facility. After serving over 10 years in the district court bench, the governor appointed me to complete Judge Hobgood's term because he had mandatory retirement at 72. And as a Superior Court judge, I held that position in 2018 until the election in 2018. That experience, still presiding over $25,000 more civil complaints and criminal court, criminal felony matters, jury trials, all of those experiences I'm bringing to the ballot as the experienced candidate.
So,
I'm
tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up, and where'd you go to school?
originally from Danville, Virginia, a little town on the other side of Durham, if you're going out that way, Highway 58.
Right.
Parents and my siblings are still in Danville. I attended Hampton University and obtained my Bachelor of Arts in Sociology with an emphasis in criminal justice. North Carolina Central School of Law with my Juris Doctorate, 2 years of my master's at Shaw University, pursuing a master's in divinity. I'm a licensed and ordained minister, and I serve here in Granville County on the ministerial staff of my church. I'm very active in my community, being a member of a host of organizations that are community focused, to include Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. And I love helping out our children because I'm also a volunteer teen court judge here for over 10 years. And that's a diversion program to help our kids who get in trouble in the system or in the school system or in our community. And it redirects them back into the system of being a student and getting the services they need with stakeholders and wraparound services here in our community.
So, when would you say you started thinking about being a lawyer and going to law school and following that career path?
Well, that goes back to sixth grade when Mrs. Adams required us to write an essay, 500 words. Who do you want to be when you grow up? And, coming from a single parent home and watching my mom struggle as a nurse practitioner, often going to classes with her on her hip where her classmates babysat me so she could take an exam. All of those images of watching her struggle to take care of us and knowing that we didn't have what we needed at the time as kids. Something about Perry Mason and then winning every case as the it's something about winning a case as an attorney, and I just knew. So I wrote that essay, and Miss Adams, of course, wrote back something like, "You may want to think about being a teacher or a nurse." And I took that home to my mom, to know my mom, who's a fire breathing mother, who if you tell her kid she can't do something, you've met the wrong one. So she took me back up elementary school and told Mrs. Adams, my daughter can be whomever she wants to be, and you better not tell her differently. And so it's been a trek since then to make sure that kids have what they need. And I think that was my drive to be a child support enforcement attorney, as I was for Vance County for a number of years, and also an attorney representing Vance County for DSS court abuse, neglect, and dependency cases.
So, like Perry Mason, have you won all the cases, Judge?
No, but I have my share.
Yeah, anybody who's practiced law for any length of time knows that the there's some cases that you just can't win, but you do your best for your clients,
Actually, yeah.
and that's your job. Um, so tell us a little bit about Hampton University. Folks may not know it's that much about Hampton.
Well, we called it Home by the Sea. Beautiful by the water. In fact, watching mom struggle, I didn't think that I could go to Hampton. I mean, I just, I planned to work for a little while and then, you know, pay my way through school. And then it was my school counselor at George Washington High in Danville, Virginia, that, took me home in her car and said, this young lady has not filled out her paperwork or anything like that. And they sat at the kitchen table and completed all of my paperwork, and I was admitted to Hampton University. It was a wonderful experience going to an HBCU, and it encourages you to find your voice and to be strong in your passion. And so it was a wonderful experience. And
All right, so this is forgive my ignorance on this, but Hampton's in Norfolk, or is it in
and Hampton,
Hampton? In Hampton.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
next door to Norfolk.
Right, right. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I was born in Norfolk, so I should, but then left shortly thereafter. So we're both native Virginians, although I like to claim myself as a North Carolinian. Um, so did you go straight from undergrad to law school, or did you take some time off?
No, straight to law school. My mom would not have it any other way. She says, once you get out, you start making bills. You make bills, you have to make money, and then you just never said go for it. And so we pushed through all the sacrifices that she made to help pay tuition. I'm so grateful and thankful to her.
So, and you were in the day program
Yeah,
at North Carolina Central in Durham.
yeah.
What do you recall from your law school days? Any particular classmates that you've kept up with over the years, or experiences,
Oh,
professors?
absolutely. The professor that we all love was Professor Ringer, and he was our champion to remind us that the minute we walked across that stage and got our degrees and our license, we were walking, talking shingles, and that we should always present ourselves as such. And he would give us, like the life lessons. Don't drive around with a dirty car. That is your business card, and just the basics. And then to make sure we understood that when we walked into a courtroom, we were trial attorneys. And I loved that they took the time to hone in our craft, to argue our positions to be able to articulate our positions without getting angry and focusing on the law and focusing on our clients. Wonderful school, and I would recommend it to anyone who wants to be a serious trial attorney.
Yeah, I actually taught for a number of years in the evening program, taught appellate advocacy. Do you recall who you had for appellate advocacy? Since you're running for an appellate court, yeah, who would that have been?
Gosh, you're making me tell my age. That was 90. You're making me tell my age.
All right, I'll give you away. You didn't have me though.
I didn't have to.
So after law school, how did you begin your practice?
Hit the ground running, hung my own shingle. I started working out of Pat Evans' office. She was an attorney then. Pat is a district court judge and in Durham County, and it was a small law firm, and I rented space from her. And then I started attending a church in Henderson and realized that there were a host of clients in the church,
Mhm.
and moved my practice to Henderson, North Carolina. That's where it all began for me. I opened up what we call a storefront office in Henderson, um, right in front of the courthouse, perfect position, and it just bloomed. Being one of three female attorney firms in Henderson, it was a wonderful experience.
So, what type of cases did you primarily litigate or work on during those early years?
Mostly family law. And then, of course, being a new attorney in the area, you immediately get assigned to the court appointed cases for criminal matters and juvenile delinquency matters. But I found early on, because of my background and wanting to be an advocate for broken families, my passion leaned toward family law. And eventually it just became solely family law with some estate wills work. And then simultaneously being contract attorney for DSS. It just grew from there.
So, tell us about the circumstances that led you to become a district court judge.
Well, I'm kind of nerdy that I have always had a 5-year plan, and I just knew that at 40, I mean, looking at all the cases that were before me, and as an attorney, something happens when you realize that the power of change comes with the power of the pen, and I felt like I could do a better job being on the bench to help clients stood in front of the bench, and so at that time, I just planned. To build a practice, build a community effort to make sure that the people understood that I wasn't just in the courtroom, but an advocate in the community. And then from there, I just ran. It was a difficult race, I might add, because Charles Wilkinson, our longest serving district court judge, I don't know if you remember Judge Charles. I ran against his son because Judge Wilkinson was preparing to retire. And it was a hard fought because it was just understood that, well, that's the judge's son. And obviously, he would be next. And we, to the nail, ran that race. And thankfully, the people supported me. And over 10 years later, was not opposed.
Now, was that in the Democrat primary that you ran against him, or was that the general election?
That was the general. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so, had you been involved in campaigns or politics before?
I supported Judge Quan Bridges. I was his campaign manager for a while when he was running. You remember Judge Lloyd, who passed away?
Mhm.
He ran for that seat. Advocated for some of our local campaign or candidates in the Ninth Judicial District. So, yeah, I kind of watched the scenes and prepared to get ready to run.
So, when we get to talking about this Court of Appeals race, we'll compare the difference of running a district court race versus a statewide appellate race.
I don't think
But
it's fair.
yeah, I understand that for sure. Yeah. So, so you served 10 years as a district court judge. You indicated you'd, sort of covered the waterfront with all the different types of cases. Was it the family law or domestic cases that you were most attracted to, or any particular area?
Well, in district court, you come prepared to hear what's in front of you, what's on the bench that day. So, be it be it domestic or juvenile, you're game on. When you hit the bench and they give you this bucket of files, and hopefully in district court, the way it moves so quickly, you take the time as often as you can to prepare mostly for your family cases where you have to make findings of fact, as opposed to district criminal traffic court. It's you just go right down the book, and those cases sometimes are so backlogged. Some days, unfortunately, you just feel like you're pushing paper in traffic court. Speed tickets. All right, uh, 30 days to pay your traffic ticket, and you keep it moving. But family court, you have to take the time to really listen to all of the evidence and make sure. I used to have like a grid. That's how I manage my court orders, plaintiff, defendant, rule of law on the bottom, and then make my order in the bottom grid. So that's how I was able to manage and administer, to be an administrator and also a referee with all the attorneys arguing their positions.
So, did it feel a little strange when you first put the black robe on and got the gavel in your hand, moved to the bench?
Um, Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. But thankfully, I had Judge Daniel Finch, who was our chief. He took about 2 weeks to mentor me. He was sometimes in the courtroom and would give me suggestions. We Some of the judges at that time, we did like a mock trial, and he sat there and gave me some pointers. I've had wonderful mentors. J. Henry Banks was on the bench at that time. So a really good team here in the Ninth Judicial District.
So, how many district court judges were there in the district?
6.
6, really? Okay, that's So and how many counties were you responsible for?
At that time, 4, but since
Yeah,
then we added Person County.
okay. So I won't even attempt to try and figure out how many citizens are in all those counties, but a
Right.
lot of people, right?
A lot of people. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So during this time, was that when you became active in the church and uh, went back to school, I guess, at night to get a divinity degree, or
Well, in this in the faith world, we call it accepting your call. I mean, my
right?
mother is a pastor, and she would always say, "Well, no, Mom, I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that calling." But then when I finally, accepted it, I started with my initial sermon in 1994, and then licensed in 96, and then finally ordained in 2014. My faith has always been a part of my growth, and it just didn't start because I became also a judge or a politician or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
In fact, my mentor pastor made this joke that just made me like, "What did you just say?" He said, "So you want to be a legal liar?" I mean, so I was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
"No, I want to be an attorney."
yeah. Yeah, help people, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, well, did you use your judicial robe for your robe in the pulpit, or did you get a different one?
I know I have a different one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And how big a congregation do y'all have?
Wow, here in Granville and my church, it's just Cornerstone Christian Community Church. It's a large congregation, and often when I go around to preach in other churches, um, I'm called upon to preach a different ceremony, mostly in the Women's Day programs and things like that. I will go around, and because I'm also um, a domestic violence awareness advocate. I have this ministry called Abigail's Veil, and had to eventually write a book, 2016, where I trained the faith community about what the law provides for domestic violence and what the scripture provides, and how we are not to do and say certain things which will re-victimize from the pulpit.
So, before we get into the Court of Appeals campaign, you also had a 2 years brief stint as a Superior Court judge, which you mentioned earlier in your comments. How did that come about, and what was your experience there?
Well, when Judge Hobgood announced his retirement, I began to petition our governor based upon my experience, and had a lot of supportive letters to come from Congressman G.K. Butterfield, my local representatives, local judges, local attorneys, and um, really requested or asked that he would consider my application. And then I get a call and said, "Hey, the governor wants to interview you." And from that interview, I just kind of waited around, and then finally got the call. "Hey, you're selected." And it was in April that I got the call from the governor's office that I was
Mhm.
served to finish out Judge Hobgood's term, but I understood that I would have to run for it. And it was during that time when we weren't having a primary, we were having a primary, we were going to have it, it was off and on. And then the last 3 days or so of filing, I was the Democratic nominee,
Right.
another Democrat filed. And so there were three of us running. There were two seats actually available for the Superior Court seat, and I was running to retain the seat and was not successful in retaining the seat.
So, and you had what less than a year? Is that yeah,
Right. Yes,
yeah.
I confirmed for 2018.
Yeah, I've experienced that appointment short. You have a short amount of time to not only do your new job, but to try and figure out how you're going to campaign to keep it. If it's not an impossible task, it's it's a huge challenge in it. So before we get into the Court of Appeals campaign, let me ask you a little bit about your family. Uh, t- Tell us about your family, and the decision to jump into a statewide race, which is significantly different than the local races you've been involved in.
Well, John Edward is. We've been married 7 years. We have a blended family of 5 adults. We are finally empty nesters. Catherine is the youngest, who's now attending UNCG. We have 4 beautiful granddaughters, and wow, we live out here on the farm, as we call it, in Granville County, out in the rural part of Granville County. John is retired military. He's a first sergeant. He was a drill sergeant. As I,
Yeah.
you are.
I didn't know that. I have fond memories of drill sergeants.
So he's teaching JRTC at South Granville, a local high school here, and ready to retire. And for those who are listening who understands what it means when your husband retires, oh my goodness, I'm going to try to find him a little job at Walmart to be a greeter, because he's married to a military man who thinks everybody should be up at 7 or earlier.
Yeah. Well, I can see him if he's got that hat tipped down on his head and he's barking out orders to Walmart customers to move that line along, get in step.
Nailed him exactly.
Yeah.
But he's very supportive in this race. He knows that it's my heart's passion, and in fact, he built this car from scratch. He has a model car, a classic. And I said, babe, do you think I could put the classic in the race this weekend? I mean, there was a classic show here in Vance County. And he said, do you mean to put the magnet on my paint job of my, is that what you're asking me? And so, yeah, but my family's surrounding me with a lot of support, a lot of prayers, and I'm just grateful. And so when I told him about Judge Inman's announcement in December that she was not going to run to retain her seat, and I just felt like at that time in this season, I mean, I'm 54, we don't have any kids here at home. I really wanted to try, and he said, if you want this, then I've got your back, and that's how we are. That's where we are.
Right. So the Court of Appeals, for those listening, in case they haven't listened to any of our other interviews, is our intermediate appellate court here in North Carolina. There are 15 judges from around the state that sit on the court in panels of 3. And obviously, you probably had some of your decisions as a Superior Court judge and maybe as a District Court judge reviewed by the Court of Appeals. I don't know whether you've argued any cases there, but what's your impression of the Court of Appeals?
It's an opportunity to bring what I have experienced as a trial attorney and as a trial judge, my knowledge of what happens in the courtroom and why, as an error correcting court, it would be important to have that background when hearing cases, especially when you know how the record is created, and so when I've heard about hearing in threes and always sticking in threes. If I want to dissent based upon my opinion of what should happen in a court, I don't feel like I would be challenged to do so. If it's the right thing to do, I think that my experience has shown that I'm going to stick to the law and uphold our Constitution. And so it's very important for me to be consistent with that.
Well, and I appreciate your willingness to dissent when you don't agree with the majority, and that actually, in some ways, is more significant than dissents at the Supreme Court, because at the Court of Appeals, a dissent takes that issue automatically up to the Supreme Court for their review. So uh, I would encourage you, if elected, to don't hesitate to dissent when you feel it's important. And the correct thing to do. So, all right. So you now have a statewide campaign, 100 counties, 7.4 million voters.
Did you just make me crazy on purpose?
That's just the reality of it. And so, tell us a little bit about your campaign and whether you've coordinated with the other candidates running on the Democrat ticket for the Court of Appeals and for the 2 seats on the North Carolina Supreme Court.
Well, let me just say, you can't do this kind of race without a team, and I have a wonderful team. Paula Wolf is my campaign manager. I'm sure you know,
Right.
and the woman doesn't know the word no. She doesn't understand. And when you have someone invested in your dream, your vision, it makes a difference when you're trying to run 100 counties. And I'm always somewhere all the time, be it Zoom, in a car, or in a meeting, or face-to-face conversation. And look, if I'm in Walmart, if I'm at the gas station, if I pay my money here, I want to be able to tell you what I'm doing, and hopefully get your support. It's an on, it's a 24-hour get the vote out, explain the importance of the judicial races. And yes, as often as we can, we try to support each other. If I'm going to be in Transylvania County, for example, and the other candidates who are the Democratic nominees can't be there, then I'm going to say, hey, and don't forget these candidates as well. But it's wonderful to have a team behind you to push you and to encourage you, even when you're exhausted. Any given weekend, I'm doing over 1,500 miles, and having a good driver, including Catherine, who's 19, who has a lead foot, um, it makes a difference.
I have to tell you, I try not to let my children drive me if, on my campaigns. That was more stressful than running. Uh, but yeah, I understand that. So, um, anything really surprise you about the campaign? Uh,
The when you mention Court of Appeals, and people say, well, what is that? And I was, and so that moment, especially when people think you're running against their local judge, or
right.
district, a heated judicial race that's already going on, and you're not going to run against George Judge. So I said, no, 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 no. This is statewide, and so having to explain and educate, it's been rewarding, but at the same time alarming, and that shows me why people kind of skip over that area. Yeah, I don't know any judges. I don't have any reason to know any judges. And then I start with the premise that Justice Beasley said, most people don't come to court on a good day; they come on the worst day. And so I start with that premise, like, don't wait until it's your worst day to try to figure out who the judges are. Know us now, get to know us now, look at our history, look at our experience before it gets to that point. And I tell them, like, if you are in a situation, you're in trial, and you don't feel like you had the right ruling, or the rules were not applied appropriately to your case or correctly in your case, the two most powerful words you can say in a courtroom is "I appeal." And so that's how I break the ice and try to explain to people what it's all about.
So, what would you see as your role as an appellate judge? Uh, Explain to the people what you would be doing.
And so if you are not satisfied with the ruling, and you feel like the law was not correctly applied in your case, and that you didn't get a fair shot based upon that, then the notice of appeal that you give in the courtroom will ultimately come to my desk as an appellate judge. And I'm going to have the ability to look at the record and what happened in that courtroom with an eye toward, was the law applied correctly, and then render a ruling, be it in your favor or not. I'm going to look at the record and look at what the judge did in that particular case, and determine whether or not your appeal should be sustained.
And it's not just a question of making the decision. You have to write an opinion explaining your reasoning. So, uh, just talk a little bit about that here as we sort of move towards wrapping up.
Absolutely. You're going to take the law that was applied in the particular case and look at it almost backwards, the findings of fact. And from that, you're going to do the analysis, if you will, from law school days, the IRAC. you Rule analysis and conclusions. You're going to look at the law and apply the findings of fact that are in front of you and the record, and then make the determination and write out why, based upon the law, why this should go in your favor, or why the court should be upheld or not upheld, and then send it back or send it up.
So, where would voters go to find out more about you if they didn't get enough information from our interview? Website?
Website, www.carolynthompson4judge.com. and all of the information, all of the endorsements. I'm so thankful for the number of endorsements for my candidacy. You'll see all of them there, and they're still growing, thankfully. And I really appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself and the campaign and the candidacy, and hope that I can get your support.
Well, I think people will learn a lot listening to this interview. I've enjoyed talking with you, Judge Thompson. I wish you the very best. And folks that want more information, go to Judge Thompson's website, Judge Carolyn Thompson for Judge. And we wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you so much.
Take care.